Hello, Childfree family and friends. Cody here. We're going to be joined today on episode 14, Charitable Giving for the Child Free. I am Cody Hetzel, the founder for Childfree Family. For those who don't know, it is a social network for child-free people. Basically, it's a social site without all the crazy algorithms telling you what to do and tracking you around. I don't care about that kind of stuff. I just want to connect child-free people around the world. I'm also a co-founder for the Childfree Convention, which is a virtual international event with various topics covering all types of aspects of the child-free life. That'll be happening in July 30th and 31st of 2022. So if you're in the future and you missed it, go look at the archives, check it out. But I'll be joined today by Matt Gray. Matt is a certified financial planner, and he's child-free. A key thing to note about Matt is that he is a fiduciary, which means he must put the needs and interest of his client ahead of his own. Matt manages investment accounts, and he does not receive any commissions, incentives, and kickbacks from selling products or making those kinds of recommendations. Matt, how are you today?
I'm doing really well, Cody. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. Glad you're here. Before we dive in too far, let's get this out of the way. We've got our fun disclaimer. So the following views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please seek the assistance of a professional to aid in your financial decisions. We're just a couple guys talking finance from the child-free aspects, giving you good knowledge. Take it or leave it. It's up to you. So with that in mind, we're talking about charitable giving. So Matt, what is giving?
Yeah, giving can mean a lot of different things to a number of different people. Today, we're specifically looking at, of course, charitable giving, as you've already led us into a little bit here. And charitable giving can be done a number of different ways, but the subsections of what giving is things like philanthropy would be specifically giving for the benefit of society or humankind. And a lot of people engage in philanthropy with causes they care about, things like that. Charitable giving is a little bit larger of an umbrella over that, as there are some other benefits to charitable giving that may not just be for the benefit of mankind. But I think people give for all the different types of reasons. They give different resources, money, time, etc. But I think giving is at its core meant to benefit the life of someone else rather than yourself. And I think that's the core foundation of what giving is.
And just from a broad perspective, you don't have to be rich to give. It's like a common misnomer.
Correct. Absolutely. I actually think if you look at the statistics, in terms of dollars, the wealthy give the most dollars, which is not a surprise. But in terms of the number of people who give, it's quite a bit of people who don't have significant assets or, excuse me, or resources to give away. They give in other methods, and we'll get a little bit more into that today. But giving is not for the rich only, and part of what I do is help people realize how they can make someone else's life better, basically.
Yeah, I used to work with a very a large nonprofit in my area, but it's one of the largest in the world as well. And yeah, there were people that gave the $10,000 plus gifts, but a huge chunk of the annual campaign was made up by people giving the $10, $15 a month, $100 a year, whatever it might be. That adds up when you start considering that in the thousands of people to tens of thousands of people. So it is a substantial number to think about. So it kind of with that in mind of giving and you as an individual talking to someone out there, how do they start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a lot of people do want to give and help the community somehow, whether or not they have much to give, and whether that's a number of different ways they can do it. There's really four methods that people give, and we'll kind of dive into two of them here. There are the first two that don't necessarily apply for people starting are big gifts at death, are pretty common, called bequests often. There are people who give larger amounts during their life, but then the two that are most common, and I would imagine most of our listeners and our community have participated in, are either volunteering or giving small amounts of money through pledges or various fundraisers, walks, $50 here, $10 there, whatever it is, monthly pledges. So I think the two that are easiest for people to get started with are going to be small cash gifts and cash, checks, whatever, things like that. And it might even be through other fundraisers who are walking or something to raise money for a cause. Is one very easy way, and then also volunteering by maybe becoming a walker for a cause, or maybe helping host events or things like that.
We see that a lot in social media, especially on one of the big platforms where when someone's birthday, they want to give money to a certain cause, and they ask for people to donate a certain level amount to help achieve a goal. And so, yeah, that's a small giving. It kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. That's where the small $5, $10 gifts, it ends
Right.
up being, $1,000 gift to that charity, to that nonprofit. So that's the small cash giving that really kind of adds up. And then to me, time is the most valuable resource.
Mhm.
Yeah, money's great. Nonprofits need money, but time and volunteers, like, that's what makes it go. Like, that's what makes it work. You can dump an unlimited amount of money on a nonprofit, but if there's no people there to do the work, the money will just sit there. You have to have people that are going to not only allocate where the money goes, but to also make sure that the money does go where it's supposed to go, to investigate,
Right.
to do the paperwork. There's all kinds of government I's to dot and T's to cross that people have to do as well. And then going out and asking people for money. I called myself a professional beggar when I worked for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But so volunteering to me is huge. And my wife likes to volunteer. Whenever she has a chance, she goes to a local pet rescue and volunteers there with usually the small dogs is where she ends up going to help out the most. But it's just one of those things where if you don't have necessarily the funds available, you might have some time on a weekend or something along those lines.
Absolutely. I would even say that a subsect within volunteering is really, volunteering can encompass spending any kind of time with a charity or nonprofit, really, even if that's something as simple as occasionally on social media posting their content or something
Yeah.
like that. As awareness is even quite a big factor. And I know I am not extremely involved with this organization, but I have been affected directly by a health condition. And so there's a national foundation for that condition. And I often will just post their content. And when they had a fundraiser, I shared that fundraiser, and it raised quite a bit of money through my network, as social media has pretty extensive reach. And they actually reached out to me directly and like, how did you do this? Like, how did you raise this money so quickly? And it wasn't my money. It was just, me posting some stuff. And I said, I just posted it and told people that it's an important cause, and they donated and they resonated. So yeah, you don't even have to have much resources. You don't even really have to have a ton of time. As long as you can help build awareness, these are all things that people can do to really jump in.
That's awesome. And some people might think, well, I don't know where to give or who to give to. And, some thoughts that I have, and you can throw your 2 cents in as well, is, well, what are you passionate about? Is there, like, for you, there was a health cause that gave you a reason to look into a specific entity. Some people, they might love pets. Some people, even though we're child free, that doesn't matter. They can love kids, and they want to volunteer time at a Big Brothers Big Sisters or something along those lines, and help kids,
Right.
and be a mentor. So there are tons of ways for people to get involved, especially in the volunteering aspect. So really, to me, it's just look at your passion.
Completely. Yeah, I think you can look at your network of friends and family, and see what's really impacted your life quite a bit. I think is really a good starting place. And if you're fortunate not to have had something, a significant issue in the world, or not even issue, but health thing or something else, then yeah, go straight to your passions as well. To your point, and I think you'll find quite quickly that even within your passion area or cause that you care about, there are more specific nonprofits within that. So for like a health, organization, for instance, there might be a nonprofit that focuses on awareness and public outreach, where there's another one that might focus on research for a cure, where another one might be focusing on assisting people who are suffering from that health, impact or diagnosis. So you could even say, okay, well, I care about XYZ, but how do you want to help the community that cares about that? And you've even got options within that group. So there's definitely a lot to determine and ways to go when you're looking at where to start giving.
Yeah, and with the volunteering and time aspect, it might be a stereotype, but a lot of people, look at the child free community and say, well, you guys must have a lot of time available to do things. And in some aspects, we do, because we don't have children. So we don't have to go to, soccer games unless you want to support a niece, a nephew, or, a neighbor's kid or something. You don't have to go to those events. So you do have a little bit of time that may be available if you're not filling it with hobbies or activities, or, maybe a second, third job even sometimes. But
Right.
if you do have that time for child free people, yeah, the volunteering opportunity might be there. And that might be a good way to dip your toes in and learn more about a nonprofit. And that might be who you end up giving monies to later in life.
Yeah,
So
definitely. I'd agree with that wholly. And even not directly related to child free, but a lot of people do kind of dip their toes in with spending a little time with an organization, even if it's something as simple as, going out to a park in the evening and picking up some trash at the park with a group of 5 other people or something.
yeah,
That's even a great start of just learning, okay, well, how can I directly impact? Maybe it's a local community, maybe it's a national cause, but either way, I think most people, I would say particularly child-free people, can spare an evening on occasion to go out and do something like that. And yeah, I think it's definitely a good way to get started.
yeah. And so the bullet point we have now is like, so when to give? Like,
Mhm.
when is the right time to give?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors that go into when to give. Of course, you have to have whatever you're going to give, you have to have that on hand, right? If you're going to give your time, you need to have time to give. If you're going to give some money, you need to have some money. So I think that's an important distinction. But the two I really want to focus on today, because, well, they encompass pretty much every time possible, is historically, it's been very common to give when you pass away, or at death, often called bequests or things like that. But now it's becoming more and more common to give during life, also known as an inter vivos gift, or an inner life gift. And so it really depends on what it is you're hoping to get out of the gift itself and what you want to see done with it. I'll kind of go into some pros and cons here of each one.
Yeah.
And I should preface this in saying there's no right way to give at all. If you're giving time, generating awareness, giving some financial resources, other resources like expertise or anything, that's very generous. And it's always a good time. But is for each giver and each donor, is there something that really makes sense for them? So if you're going to give at death, which is historically the more common way of doing it, but less and less so as time goes on, I think it's very common, because people know that they're only going to give what is left over. There's no risk of giving when you've passed away. You don't need that money anymore, theoretically. I would guess not. And so that money, you can go, okay, well, carve out 5% of whatever's left over and give it to, my cause that I care about, pets or something like that. Great. Well, I want to fund to sponsor a number of pets, whatever, or a scholarship fund, or for students at my alma mater. That's great. The benefit of that, again, being you can probably reach financial independence earlier because you're not giving money away during your life as much, or at least not in large amounts. And then the other one benefit is, again, you've got more confidence in your own financial situation, more financial security, because you haven't given that money away during your life when you would still potentially need it.
Mhm.
In terms of inter vivos, or during your life gifts, the biggest impact I think people are seeing that is worth taking the risk of giving money away potentially prematurely is you can directly impact the cause you care about and see the impact that your dollars made on that organization or that cause. So, excuse me, and maybe not even dollars, but your time. So for instance, maybe you're volunteering and helping people read and learn how to read. You're helping students, or maybe one that's fairly common is former inmates write resumes or something like that. And then you can see those students or those people progress and go do well. And that magnifies the fulfillment that you receive from benefiting society, which again comes back to philanthropy. You're making the world a better place, and you get to see that happen. And that's very gratifying. So that's part of the drive to why people are starting to give during life. The other thing is these causes need, as you spoke about earlier, they need volunteers. They need people raising awareness, and they need, for better or for worse, they need money to run those operations. And so the sooner they can get those things, generally the better it is for that cause. So again, giving during life, it helps the cause a bit more, removes a bit of the donor or the giver's security and confidence in their own finances or their own time or whatever that may be. Whereas giving at death, it provides a bit more confidence to the donor, but the cause or the nonprofit may be kind of delayed in terms of their benefit.
There's a story that it circles around every now and then on social media, but there's like a child-free gentleman, and throughout his life he put like 22 or 23 kids through college. Like, he paid for their education, and that story is heartwarming to child-free people for one regard, because it really answers that question that we get hit with. It's like, well, who's going to remember you when you're gone? What legacy are you going to leave behind? And gift giving is a way to answer or avoid that question. Like, that guy is going to be remembered for a long time by those people that he's helped and their families. They're going to remember him, and it's just one of those ways that, I don't know, people don't look at it that way. It's if you give now, that you are starting your legacy now, even if it's
right.
Again, you don't have to put kids through college, but if you're volunteering time, at a nonprofit, and you're doing it so much, you're being so helpful, they might name, whatever, a building after you, or a room or something, and your name's there. Boom, there's a cool little legacy thing. So that's one way to kind of look at giving, but you shouldn't look at it for what you're getting out of it. But
right.
But it does answer that question that we always get hit with. It's like, well, what's your legacy going to be? But I kind of went off topic there. But I just find it interesting. It's like, yeah, if you can give now, you can see the impact now, and you can, make real changes, and even have a say in maybe even what happens with your funds as well, through how you want to give, or your time that you volunteer. So aside from giving during life, we've got estate planning.
Right. And this actually speaks a lot towards the word you just used, which is legacy. As typically, if you're getting a room or a classroom with your name on it, or the library is named after you or something, you've given a pretty substantial, almost exclusively financial gift to get those things. I admittedly, maybe for better or for worse, think that legacy is an overused term, not because it's a bad word by any means, but I think because I've heard it just tied to estate planning so many times. But estate planning, to rewind a little bit, because a lot of times it's a confusing term if you haven't come across it before. Estate planning is not to do with real estate. It could theoretically, but estate planning is not housing planning. The second definition of estate is basically one's net worth. So what estate planning is determining what happens to your net worth, your money, your real estate, or whatever else, when you pass away, or theoretically, if you become incapacitated and can't make decisions for yourself. Estate planning helps make those decisions now, so there's not big arguments or trying to figure it out later when you've passed away or something. So estate planning is really important. And I go, this is a little bit seems a little bit non sequitur, but it pertains to charitable giving so much, because if you wanted to give at death, often that's listed in your estate plan, where you say, oh, I want to give a bit to my nieces and nephews, a little bit of that. And, I know my sister has a bit of debt I'd like to clear up, but outside of that, I want to give the rest to charity or something. Perfect. The estate plan is what handles that for you. And most people, most notably, understand an estate plan, or would recognize it as a trust and or a will. And I think Hollywood has kind of popularized the idea of a will. It's still used quite often, almost in anyone who has a plan. But those vehicles help people outline, how do I want to give at death? If I do want to give, how do I add a nonprofit as someone or an entity that will receive something from me? And I think you're absolutely right in that it does create a legacy. And there are a lot of ways about going about that. Maybe someone, like, I think that man that you mentioned was a janitor or something too, which just magnifies.
It might have been, yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Where, he didn't have like substantial means. He just lived frugally, and then had a bunch at the end. I was like, oh, I'll give it all away now.
Fact checkers, let us know in the comments.
yeah, exactly. I don't remember exactly what that was, but you can do something like that. Or there are also other options, like, what, I'm going to put this money aside, and I want to set up a scholarship that pays for books for maybe 10 students every year or something as they go to college, or whatever else it is. There's all different kinds of ways to do it. I know we're talking about students a lot here, whatever it is, that could be a number of different causes. Anyway, the estate plan helps outline exactly how you want that to occur. And for a number of reasons, estate plans particularly apply to child-free people.
And we discussed the estate planning in some previous videos, but just to kind of give a tiny snapshot, like, what would you say to the person who says, well, I don't need an estate plan. I'm not worried about it.
I think the fastest thing I say that bothers people is I go, if you don't have an estate plan, the state or the government literally decides what happens to your money. And people are not happy about that in general. And so that normally fixes the situation. But if you really come across someone who doesn't care what happens to their money, that's usually an issue. And they usually haven't come to talk to me at that point if they don't care what happens to their money. But overall, estate plans are critical. The other thing I do often tell people, it saves headache for your survivors, whoever is around after you, siblings, nieces, nephews, whoever else is around. It's that roadmap for them. So even if you're not doing it for you, you should do it for those who you leave behind, so that they can very easily and cleanly take care of the situation and make sure everything gets handled appropriately in that regard.
And so moving on to our next thought here is, well, so why give?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the first reason, really, and what I think should be the primary reason, which is you want to benefit society, right? Somehow, whatever cause it is. I tell people that I work with professionally, I say, I don't care which end of the spectrum you are politically, I don't care what your cause is, I don't care what any of it is. If you think it's going to benefit the world, that's why you should be giving to that. So that's number one: benefit the world, benefit society, fellow man and woman and other kind, and whoever else is out there. You want to make their lives better. So that's number one. But the two other that are really interesting here, well, maybe not, as we'll see. There's one that your mind, psychologically, you actually have the pleasure centers of your mind activate when you give money away to good causes or causes you believe in. So what do people always say? Like, oh, chocolate and wine and like all these things that activate in your mind. I'm like, throw in charitable giving, because that fits in with chocolate and wine, as activates the same parts of your brain. And so maybe a nice evening in includes a donation to charity, a nice bit of chocolate and a bottle of wine. That's really a cool thing to know, that when you help someone else, and I think we've probably in some capacity all experienced that, when you benefit someone else, you truly do feel good. You have this, what do they call it? The warm, fuzzy feeling. There's a reason that, and you actually have a psychological reaction to it.
What's the old adage? It's better to give than receive. Like, it's,
of course, yeah. There's definitely. I mean, think of the magnitude of that. Like, it actually feels better to give whatever, your time or your money away, than to receive the equivalent of the same amount. That's pretty significant to know that's the case. So I think there's that, which is certainly a benefit, knowing that you've improved the world. You get kind of that little selfish, admittedly, little dopamine hit of, oh, nice, I'm doing good for the world. And second, the IRS, the federal government in the United States, wants to also encourage you to give your money away to those.
Warm fuzzies are great, but like brass tacks, if it can save you money on the back end too, hey, that ain't bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending what you're giving away and how much you're giving away and all that kind of stuff, unfortunately, they don't let you get any tax benefits from volunteering. Hopefully, maybe sometime in the future. But for now, if you were to give some money away, or other things that aren't money, like gold or stocks or property or something, you will actually get a tax deduction. Again, this is all kind of an asterisk because so many different factors apply, but the general rule is you will get a tax benefit from doing so. So if that's the case, it's just a little nudge from the IRS to say, hey, you want to make the world better? We'll throw you a bone as well. Here, or take a little bit of money savings in terms of taxes.
So just talking about the giving nonprofits, there's really a great point that I want to bring up, which is nonprofits and the child-free community. And again, as we are in society in general, we're kind of overlooked as a demographic, which we are a demographic of millions and millions of people. And nonprofits, whether they realize it or not, we're a key demographic for them. And I think you've got some statistics on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the statistic, I know I've posted an article recently that kind of uses a slightly different statistic. The one I'll use today is specifically about people who have an estate plan or people who have a plan for what's going to happen to their money when they pass away. Of that group, they've actually looked at the statistic to see, okay, depending on what your family structure is, who gives, or like what percentage of that population gives. So, for instance, um, for people who have trust and or wills and have grandchildren, only 4% of those people give to charity within their estate plan. So saying, I'm going to give some money away that I have left over. Now, we can change that a little bit and say, if you don't have grandchildren, but you only have children, those people give, or 6% of those people give money away in their trust or will
It's
at
like
the end of their life.
50% bump if you're not a grandparent yet. It's
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. I mean, it's a significant. If you don't have grandchildren, which there's definitely a reason people say that they spoil their grandkids because they do, and that like that number shows that it's like they're significantly more likely to give money away to charity if they don't have grandchildren and if they just have children. But the staggering statistic is for those who don't have children at all, 26% give money away. So a magnitude of 5 give money away compared to those who have family members, or I should say descendants. So the simple line, the information coming from the data here is the more descendants you have, the less likely it is you are to give to charity. And that's something where it would be great if nonprofits, started to recognize more the powerhouse that the child-free community is as it comes to giving, because we don't have descendants, we're very likely to give money away, and
Mhm.
they should recognize that.
Yeah, it goes back into that term of legacy. Yeah, I imagine if you do have kids and grandkids, you're wanting the vast bulk of your funds after you're gone to go to them. But for the child-free people, that's not necessarily the case. And hopefully, nonprofits key into that. I think as time goes by, we may see shifts in charitable giving, and like especially once people have passed and they, let's say that they make a nonprofit the benefit of their insurance policy. They might have an insurance policy and they say, I'm going to give it to ABC nonprofit. If they start to see an influx of those versus the money is going to, maybe causes that don't recognize the community, don't recognize child free people as being a valid demographic, they're going to be missing out in the future. So heads up, anyone that works in the nonprofit field, like child free people, we're legit, we're here, and we're willing to give to you. Like that's whether
Right.
not even money, but our time and resources. Like we're here and willing to help. So yeah, with that in mind, Matt, I appreciate your time. It's been great, very informal, informational, and you are with AnthroFiWealth.com. Tell me more about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my own financial planning firm last year, and really with the intention of helping child-free people do just this. That's give to charity, and be able to make an impact in the causes they care about. And the more I've kind of gone into this path, I've realized, wow, child-free people, as you've mentioned, are really a powerhouse in that. And so given that I had already kind of had background and specialization in charitable giving, and I am child free, I was like, oh, I can kind of bring this together and really cater to the needs of the child free community and how their needs are different from a financial perspective. So when I started the firm, I came out and said, we can make a difference here. There are unique needs for people who are child free. Let's handle that. And that's the crux of what I'm trying to accomplish with AnthroFi.
That's awesome. So other professionals who are out there in other fields, other practices, don't be afraid to step out and say, I want to focus on the child free community as my clients and who I want to work with, because we like working with other child free people too. So Matt, thank you for your time again. I appreciate it. And as always, everyone, this will be archived and put in YouTube and other social media spaces. Feel free to comment, ask questions. If I can't answer it, I'll get an answer from Matt and we will let you know. So until next time, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Cody.